There we go.
Oh. So you're going to have two beginnings?
So you can take
I'm
the
sure,
lead,
I'm sure
John.
one of them will die.
I hope not. I think that what you conveyed about the birth of your twin grandchildren, I think is thrilling, actually. And it has a lot of rhythm. I've never been at a birth. I've been at many deaths.
Mm.
And each death I have observed and participated in had a unique rhythm. And I'm
do.
certain from reports I've heard about births, that's true of births as well.
Yeah.
I haven't been so fortunate, but I imagine that each birth, my mother reports are very different. So anyway, so it's been billions and billions of creatures have been born on this planet, and billions have died and will die, but it's always slightly different. And I think what makes it different is the rhythm. And I've been sort of invited. It said in this lead, Johnny Davis plans to perform a brief exercise to boost our biotic being out of this abiotic environment in which we are entangled. Wish me luck.
Yeah, the bar's up there, John. Let's see you jump.
That was not my self-description. That was somebody else's description. Who has a whole lot more confidence, I think, than I do in what I can deliver. I think, though, I want to sort of backtrack a little bit because I did give a title to this event. What was it exactly? Oh, completing distinctions.
Yeah.
And I have an exercise that we can do. But I sort of want to set it up. And this is definitely a rehearsal for me. I'm trying to put together a lot of different guesses and half guesses and hunches and lateral moves around, our communications and our identifications with group life. And when do we agree and when do we disagree? And when I agree with this person or this group, and that's slippery, the difference between a person and a group. What happens right before I agree? And when I disagree with this other person and this group, what happens right before I disagree? And this is a kind of rehearsal for myself because I've noticed in my own process in groups that I often strongly agree, strongly disagree, strongly don't care one way or the other. So how am I going to bring forth the best in myself and in the groups that I'm fortunate enough to be a member of in ways that are aware of that mix? And I believe this has a lot to do with our rhythm. Fast, slow, soft, hard, all the intangibles that tempo rhythms are all about, really. But when a song or a sonnet or a person has it and when they don't. And if they don't have a rhythm, they may have a rhythm that's very a static rhythm. I understand that from heart. I'm surprised by this, but there's a heartbeat that's steady and constant. That person is in danger of heart attack because it's actually a little instability in the heartbeat, a little arrhythmia is not a bad thing. It's actually a sign of health. So I'm just bringing all of this up because I had a dream, and it had something to do with a strong disagreement that was expressed in the thread. And I recognized right away that my response was, if I could appreciate the positive intention behind the others that I was having this strong disagreement, this feeling of disagreement with, that would be a good thing. So anyway, I slept on it. I'm just pondering it. And it had to do with the blind and the deaf and the hearing impaired. And how do we include those with disabilities or strong differences, maybe even cognitively, neuroatypical persons, which I consider myself to be quite neuroatypical in most settings. How do we deal with that without, I can attune to a person who's blind without putting out my eyes, or without putting, something in my ears? Do I need extreme sensory deprivation to imagine how to get into rapport with others who may have a different kind of sensory arrangement than I do? This becomes extra special, extremely challenging when you're dealing with extraterrestrials who come from another galaxy, which I've had a few occasions to try to translate their codes into something that it's humanoid. And I think we're all challenged by this in various circumstances. How many weird or unusual or novel experiences have you had, and you wanted to communicate them to another person, and you find yourself quite quickly putting this into words and stumbling quite a bit? So I think there is an art in this. Anyway, I had this spell after sleeping on it, waking up from a dream I didn't remember particularly well. I jotted down some of it later. It did come back to me. I went to my library, and I didn't intend to do this, but I just saw at the corner of my eye a book, and I opened it to a page and looked at a paragraph, and I'm going to read it. The solution to this difficulty lies in the realization that the basic abstraction is virtual gesture, and that gesture is both a visible and a muscular phenomenon, may be seen or felt. Conscious gesture is essentially communication, like language. In total darkness, it loses its communicative character. If we commune with ourselves, we imagine its visible character, and this, of course, we can also do in the dark. But to a blind person, conscious gesture is as artificial as speech to the deaf. Our most direct knowledge of gestic expression is muscular feeling, but its purpose is to be seen. Consequently, the illusion of gesture may be made in terms of visual or kinesthetic appearance, but where only one sense is actually appealed to, the other must be satisfied by implication. Because dance gesture is symbolic, objectified, every dance which is to have balletic significance primarily for the people engaged in it is necessarily ecstatic. It must take the dancer out of himself. I actually believe in Greek that's what ecstasy means. It means beside yourself. It may be, and it may do this by an astounding variety of means, by the merest suggestion motion, when physical preparations have been made in advance through drink, drugs, or fasting, by music, at once monotonous or exciting, such for instance as dervishes listen to for a long period before they rise, by strong musical and physical rhythms that enthrall the dancer almost instantly into a romantic unrealism. That's the technique behind popular ballroom dancing, she says. And most primitive and natural of all is by weaving the magic circle around the altar or the deity, whereby every dancer is exalted at once to the status of a mystic. And then I'm just going to read one more, the last paragraph here. Every dancer sees the dance sufficiently to let his imagination grasp it as a whole. And with his own body feeling, he understands the gestic forms that are its interwoven basic elements. He cannot see his own form as such, but he knows his appearance. The lines described by his body are implied in the shifts of his vision, even if he's dancing alone, and are guaranteed by the rhythmic play of his muscles, the freedom with which his impulses spin themselves in complete and intended movements. He sees the world in which his body dances, and that is the primary illusion of his work. In this closed realm, he develops his ideas. So I'm just and this is from Suzanne Langer's book, Feeling and Form, which I haven't read it yet. I'm definitely going to, though. I'm going to put it on my list. And I just wanted to, because I think she's talking about, I think the popular term for this is synesthesia, that there are overlaps in the different sensory systems. So the visual isn't just visual. The auditory isn't just auditory. The kinesthetic isn't just kinesthetic. We can break or touch or taste or smell. There's always an overlap. And that overlap, that in between the different senses, is where I imagine a self emerges. So, and there are different kinds of senses. There are the physical 5, plus the sixth sense, according to the Buddhists, is the mind. And there are also what I would call the trans-physical senses, which in esoteric and occult orientations, we have versions of the senses that are not physical. Like when you close your eyes and go into a trance, or you go to sleep at night, or you get a hit on the head by a brick and have a vision. They're all different. There are many different ways. Sometimes near-death experiences, very traumatic episodes, trigger these kind of out-of-body or ecstatic occasions. And I think the challenge is, how do we translate all that into something that makes sense to others? It's not easy to do that, but it does appear that almost all of the major religions that we know of centered around someone who had a vision. And I believe we're in a different kind of, I don't think we need to, I think the challenge here is we sometimes elevate the visionary to the top of the heap, the king or queen of the rock. And I think that comes out of our very, this sort of neoliberal, globalizing, late capitalism initiatives. We pay big bucks to the visionary. And I sort of want to say, I think a visionary is a worker. I like to think of myself as a cultural worker. And the visionary and the critic and the realist are all necessary. We just need to figure out what their appropriate function is in any system or any group that we're a member of, or a family, or a culture. And how we do that, I think, the larger culture of which we're all members, how can we nourish and support the flourishing of as many people as we can in networks that are mediated by this technology, which for my purposes really sucks. A podcast, you put a blindfold and tie my hands behind my back and put tape over my mouth. I can't work in that field. I can't work with the field of all possibilities with those kinds of constraints. I don't want to, but I understand. I do like to hear a podcast once in a while. And I certainly understand if you have a car, you want to spend a lot of time listening to podcasts and drive home at the same time. I don't have a car, so it's not like a big plus for me to listen to podcasts, but definitely I see the advantage to doing that. But I see huge advantages to, I see your face, I hear your voice, and I watch your hands as you talk. And to me, that's infinitely more important than anything you actually say. As interesting as the content of what you say is going to be, is much less communicable than all that messy analogical stuff that we do. And I think this is our challenge as we're moving out of, as we're moving into this digital communication only kind of drama. We're going to be rearranging our senses, and our relationships are going to follow that rearrangement. So my feeling is, drawings are a social occasion. And as I've done these clean language exercises, basically I realize my intention is to catch the other person's rhythm. And is there anything else about that? What kind of is that? Where does that come from? And what does that want to have happen? It invites a rhythmic response. And then, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up, dude? hey, you know, and so what? I think if we slow a little bit down, chunk it down, you can go into one word or a phrase or a whole sentence, and you can spend hours, and I've done this, literally hours, days. I've had sessions with people. The best way to do clean language is 3 hours a day for 3 days. And at the end of those 3 days, that person's transformed. And I could go to another day, but most people can't handle it because they go into such ecstasy that it's borderline birth, rebirth, and a very intense drug experience. So our language, to me, is a drug, and it can be used, and we can overdose on it. It's extremely flexible, incredibly creative, as we all know. We love poetry, we love theater, we love being able to say something or get something off of our chest, or how once we express that, a weight is lifted from our shoulders. So we have all these metaphors for communication at our best. So I'm just wanting to, after we do these little exercises where I use clean language on purpose, sometimes it's not something that I use at all. I just go into average, ordinary conversation mode, which I dearly love and enjoy and totally think is necessary. But when I do these little ritual things where I really look, pay attention to, and catch the rhythm of something, of a person's actual language, not what I'm projecting, not what I think I heard them say, not a comparison with something I already know, but the language that they use. There's something holographic about it. And I just want to, and then when you represent that in a way that makes sense to you, which is what a drawing probably is for most people. It could be a sketch, it could be a doodle. I actually do not call it art, because that's the best way to shut up a person, is tell them, create a work of art around this. Because everyone's been traumatized into thinking they're not a visionary and they're not an artist. But I think I just am very amused by, I don't know if you guys can see this. Can you see that? There's object, and then there's a script. There's a text right to it. This is a shopping list by Michelangelo.
Wow.
And the Italian next to the images is basically 2 loaves of bread, a bottle of wine, some figs and some dates. You know, he's making a list. Maybe he had a party, or maybe he's thinking about how he's going to feed his apprentices for lunch today. Who knows? But then there's this one. Can you see that one?
Oh, wow. Eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. Very trippy. And I can find another one that I really like. And there's this one. These are his from his sketchbooks. These are his doodles. And we had a conversation on death, the last Death Café, and completing distinctions is sort of the title. And I wanted to, I had a drawing. Oh, this one came up to me in that Death Café. The setup for the Death Café, we did a dialogue, Michael and I, and this image arose out of a dreamscape. And I would invite Douglas and Michael. You also had drawings after that last cafe. Could you hold that up? Okay. Up and a little closer. Yeah, that's it. I got it. I got it. Beautiful. Thank you. And Doug, did you bring your drawing that you did from the Death Cafe?
Got it in the notebook here somewhere. It's posted on the forum, so
You don't have the notebook with you. Okay. So I'm just bringing this to our attention because I think this, when we put into words something that we've sketched, a sketch, a representation that makes sense to me, and then I show it to you and try to add some words to it, I think it invites a synesthetic effect. I believe our senses start to intensify, and our affective zone, the zones of the affective source of these kinds of word interplay with the visual and the kinesthetic, I think it enhances our intelligence collectively, because this isn't just about expressing myself, it's actually a communication to everyone in the group. So I believe this is a way of thinking relationally. And I wish I could do it better than I actually do. I sometimes watch these events after they happen, and I realize, oh my God, I missed so much in the moment, that as I look back at the archive, I can say, oh yeah, I can see what I missed there, and I also can see what I responded to and what others responded to, and I can also see 2 or 3 sessions after that what has happened. And so I feel it's something that what I feel is missing is we're not connecting. I feel like there's sometimes and I'm not just saying here, I think it's everywhere. There are too many open loops. We're not closing enough of these loops to make a difference, that makes a difference. And I don't know exactly how to do this, but I want to invite a kind of reflection space among us. If you have a drawing from a cafe that you did previously, like I just showed you, and Michael just showed, and Doug doesn't have his with him, but he did have something that he posted. I think we can juxtapose these 3 different images. We can ask what's in between them. And also, what do we know now that we did not know then? Or what do we know now after that event has occurred? And I know now, as I look at this, I think we did this about a week, maybe 2 weeks ago. I have a funny feeling that I came across a phrase, very beautiful, from a ritual that was an African ritual for someone who was severely depressed. And the part of the ritual, they bury the guy in the ground. A whole village comes out. They're all drumming, right? And they're all shouting and screaming. And they dig a hole in the ground. They put the depressed person in the hole. They bury him with all these blankets and odds and ends from the village. And it's all stacked on top of him. He's sweating. It's so hot. He's almost ready to pass out. Then they take it all off and they pull him up. And they slaughter a goat and pour the blood all over him. And then he takes the entrails. They wrap the entrails of the ram that they've slaughtered and wrap him up in this. And then then he has to take parts of the slaughtered animal and bury it in holes. And he has to say something. I can't remember he has to repeat something. He's saying something to the spirits. And I want to get this. Yeah. He says, spirits, leave me alone to complete the business of my life and know that I will never forget you. That to me is pretty fucking deep. And if you don't have a different relationship to your depression, after that, I don't know what's wrong with you. Because you may have a depression, but it won't be the same as it was. And I find this particular person who describes this ritual, he meets another person from Africa where this ritual happened. And this African man describes he understands this ritual very well. And he contrasts it with what Westerners do. And he says, you know, we had a lot of trouble with the Western mental health workers who came here immediately after the genocide. And we had to ask some of them to leave their practice. And we had to ask them to leave. Their practice did not involve being outside in the sun, like you're describing, which is, after all, where you could begin to feel better. There was no music or drumming to get your blood flowing again when you're depressed and you're low, and you need to have your blood flowing. There was no sense that everyone had taken the day off so that the entire community could come together to try to lift you up and bring you back to joy. There was no acknowledgement that the depression is something invasive and external that could actually be cast out of you again. Instead, they would take people one at a time into these dingy little rooms and have them sit around for an hour or so and talk about all the bad things that had happened to them. We had to get them out of the country. So I'm sharing this with you because I feel like our therapy is, there are brilliant therapists out there, and there are certainly people who need it. But I think our system is not able to accommodate, I believe, what's happening right now. You know, going to these dingy little conference rooms and paying someone $150 an hour, you know, to listen to your tales of woe. I think this is the culturally sanctioned form of therapy. And what I hope we do different here is we're not doing that. We're doing something where I think that public-private and the capacity to draw and to catch the rhythm has a rejuvenating effect. I may be wrong, but I feel like this is the kind of I wish to God I had what I have now 30, 40 years ago. Because that's when I was in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. And I was in a community where, you know, my friend Russell, may he rest in peace, he went to his therapist and he described to her the death of, that year he had lost 10 friends. And he and his therapist burst into tears. And she said, I can't take this anymore. I know all about every theory there is about grief, and I can't deal with what you're going through right now. Which was honest on her part, but it didn't leave him in a better space, and he still had to pay her. You know? So I'm just saying, what happens when we're dealing with grief on a scale that humanity has never seen before? We're talking about wipeouts, large sections of our population, our human population, and the non-human populations, and the death of the oceans, and you know, all of the stuff that's in our air and in our water and in our food. And you know, I also think there's other things we can do. I think we can let ourselves get extremely depressed. Certainly I can do that, but I'm hoping that we can do something different. Maybe if we just practice throwing a frisbee, you know, to a friend, or paying attention to children, you know, at the playground who are laughing. These are real antidotes, I think, to suffering. And I think it has a lot to do with our being able to open ourselves up to the rhythms of others. And I hope that I think is what holds societies and, you know, cultures and civilizations together. So anyway, that's my spiel. I hope this simulated something that we can all talk about, and I'm really curious about your responses. And once again, that question of when you disagree at your best with a group, what happens right before that? Or when you agree with the group, what happens right before that? There's something about that micro-perceptual, right in the middle of nowhere kind of space where I believe we get a lot of excellent information if we can pay attention. So anyway, I hope this stimulates another lively cafe. Thank you.
So what are the exercises we're going to do, John?
Well, I sort of wanted to have a little open frame before we did that.
I appreciate that. I was just
I'm sure you guys have a lot to say or communicate, or or you want to dance and sing and scream, that's okay too.
Okay. Well,
I don't know.
I'll just jump on board as I really resonate with a lot you say, because you gave words to practices and perceptions that I've been working with ever since. I'm going to go all the way back ever since I attempted my own suicide and then my accident, because I think a lot of what you said resonates, because from my attempted suicide and then with my accident became an intense understanding of the kinesthetic sense of that movement that you're talking about, of being aware of that micro movement between two different states or two different senses. And so a lot of what you said and the shamanic practices really vibe with me. I have my, I've had to kind of use reading and different, I've been in therapy from time to time, but a lot of it has been through reading and just all by myself. That's one reason I like this cafe, because I seem to be surrounded by people that have been doing it from their place of experience for a long time too. So thank you very much for that introduction.
Thank you. And that micro movement, just to replay some of this, and the kinesthetic and the micro movement between the senses, and use of reading, and all by myself.
Yes.
And what you like about the cafe is you're not all by yourself.
100%.
Cool.
100%.
Thank you.
And it feels like I'm in a community that overall there's similarities of practices going on amongst all of us in our own different way, but there is a common ground or intersection point that resonates really well with me, and it has helped me kind of just learn to trust this path I've been walking. Moving on.
Thank you. Does anyone do you have something different or the same or something?
I'd like to pick up there where Michael left off. We live in a culture, as you pointed out, John, that is exceedingly visual. But we also live in a culture that's exceedingly verbal. That doesn't mean that we say anything. It just means that a lot of words get thrown at a lot of things. So when we have an emotional or a psychic or a mental hurt, we're supposed to talk it off. I was just the other day, I was down at the Bambini soccer practice for the 4-year-old, and you run into each other. You get kicked in the shins. It's no different here than in the United States or in Canada or wherever else. You get slightly injured physically, and what does the coach tell you? Walk it off. So you just get up. You don't address it, but you do. You distract yourself, but you get focused. We're kind of in those spaces, and the question that always comes up for me was, well, how is that really the way to go about doing it? I'm not a person that is very good at talking things through. When something happens, I don't necessarily want to talk about it at all. I want to stew, and I want to mull, and I want people to come up to me and say, get off your duff or get over it, just because that's kind of what I expect people would do. And they're right. I have to do that. But most of the things that hurt or that impinge or that inhibit or whatever they aren't things that are easily verbalized. And this is this is not a criticism, but I can't draw pictures about them either. I have this feeling, and I'm the kind of person that if I have a feeling that I want to give some kind of expression to, it generally comes out in words. I might try to write a poem. I might try to sit down. I might write a text of some sort. I journal in order to I don't walk it off. I write it off. Not in the sense of writing it off that, okay, now I don't have to worry about it any longer. But in, you know, it's not in that echo neoliberal, you know, whatever. I'm not writing them up, but I can write my way through things because words happen to be one of the ways that I have learned to deal with. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that I've got a good approach or that I would recommend it to anybody else, because it's like you said, John, that was a nice thing about what was embedded in a lot of what you said, is everybody kind of has to find their way of expressing that. And it might be kinesthetic, and it might be tactile, and it might be verbal, and it might be auditory. It might be some other, but what I think we need to encourage everyone to do is find your way and go with it. And one of the nice things about the cafe that Michael points out is we kind of let people have their own way. So if somebody wants to talk, they talk. And if somebody wants to draw a picture, they draw a picture. If somebody wants to bring up an image or throw in, you know, a music clip, that's fine. We all go, okay, well, that's how that person's doing it. That's how they're handling it. That's how they're expressing this. And what it does, for me at any rate, is that it sensitizes me and opens me up to these different modes of expression that are a way of talking it through, working it through, walking it off, or whatever it is. And so that's you know, that's the upside of what we're doing, and it seems to work relatively well. I always have to make a little bit of a plug for, you know, the medium that we have, because this is the only medium we have to do this. You know, we all just can't jet and sit down together somewhere and do this, and which makes it a little more challenging at times. But that's the real value that I get from this, is that I see how other people deal with things that move them, in whatever ways that they are. And I go, well, maybe I can pick up a little on that. Maybe I can do that. Maybe I will start to doodle a little more, or maybe I will try to you know, to find the song that catches my mood, or you know, recall some true melody that struck me at one time in the past. Because and this also speaks to something that you brought up before. You're one of these people, John. You always go back to the archive, and you always revisit it. You always get a second look at things like that, and that's damn near impossible for me. The entire time that I spend in the past, it's through reading. I hardly ever go back and look at something that I looked at before. I would be willing to bet that the number of movies in my life that I've seen twice, I could probably count in one hand. Because I saw it, what am I going to say? And I know from all the ones that I have seen twice, I always picked up something that wasn't there before. But the question that always comes up at the end is, okay, well, was the time and energy worth the effort for what I actually got out of it? And in most instances, it wasn't, but that doesn't mean that it wouldn't be there. It only means that in those instances where I did it, there wasn't a whole lot of return on the investment that was there. But you talk about, and that's the thing I like, John, is you talk about this all the time. You always bring up things that you saw that you didn't see before, and you always find another twist that wasn't in there. And I find those exceedingly enlivening, because you are a person that can do that it's like, I don't have that skill, but you are a person that has that skill. So I can benefit from that skill that you keep bringing, you know, that you bring these things up. So there's granted, it's a vicarious kind of learning that takes place, but it's real hard to teach old dogs like me new tricks. And I'm going, okay, well, and I can't tell you how many times I go, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn over a new leaf. I'm going to try something else. And it just doesn't work. I'm tired of disappointing myself. So I more or less kind of stopped doing that. And when the spirit, and I use that word consciously, but when the spirit moves me to do it, then I do it. Because that much I have learned in my all too short time here on this planet. When it speaks, listen. You're always a better off for you, even if you don't like what it's telling you when you're going through it. So Okay, that was my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I just want to add, I'm sorry, John. I just want to add that last part is in my journey from that I just described, a big part was attending to what is in my experience, whether I like it or not. I'm not saying I dismiss the comment of liking it or not. I'm just not going to get, as the Buddhist said, attached to one or the other. I'm going to go that, I think, aesthetic next step. Well, I don't like it. What's that about? I do like it. What's that about? Which sometimes that's harder to understand why you like something, because right from the get-go, it feels so good. You don't want to go underneath the really, well, what's there. And so, and John, I'm going to bring something up that I hope this lands on you is I'm purposely language attend to rather than pay attention because of the neoliberalism hijacking of attention. Right. And also the attending to resonates with me because I was a groundskeeper, and it's grounded in the earth kind of metaphor of cultivating and keeping a certain percentage or a big percentage in living, even though I operated machineries, you know, everything from a weed eater, Doug, to a blower to, you know, mechanical things. But the biggest proportion was how was I relating to the liveness of the environment I was trying to caretake.
I'm sorry, what, paying attention, you reject that because of the money metaphor.
Yeah, the money metaphor and attending to. Attending to. It's more, yeah, attending to, like my grandmother taught me how to tend to the roses, her garden, attend to.
Right. And
that's something that's come online since I've been tweaking myself.
I've been working with that too. I've been trying to stop saying pay attention because I was told that usually by hostile people. Pay attention.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that too. Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's but I like to say give attention. Can I give attention?
Yes, yes.
Give it away, free of charge. I'm just going to give you attention.
Okay.
And hopefully
that's fine too. That's fine too, John.
I'm working on it, but I think those are the kind of micro little decisions that we make that have a big impact. And some of it's culturally, we share easy metaphors with each other because we're just so used to them.
Yeah.
But sometimes we want to slow down and unpack it a little bit and say, no, I don't mean pay attention. I mean, I want to give attention. And I think that's very important. And
it shifts our attention. It shifts slight shift of metaphor. I mean, I don't want to get rid of any metaphor, even pay attention, but I don't want to use it as much, I guess.
And I know Ed had to exit. I hope he's coming back soon.
Yeah, he probably had to take care of something in the household.
Because I wanted to respond to something that he said, but Doug, you please share. Do you have something to offer? I saw a gesture. Good.
But you started, there was quite a bit that has been said already, just within your introduction, and Michael building on top of that, and Ed building on top of that. And you started out with the rhythms, the sensing of tempo rhythms, biorhythms, the various, I guess we've termed it epistemologies. We all have our own epistemology. Jeffrey brings up one of his friends that say we each have our own ontology, and so there's various ways of saying that we're different, or we have differences and atypicalities that aren't connected to our core experience. And I think one of the reasons I don't say much or can't say much is because I'm saying so much to myself throughout the day, whether I'm writing to myself or thinking to myself, thinking while the three of you shared your thoughts, shared what's going on in your head. And when it comes time to actually being with others, I like the idea of listening, and sometimes there's a place for simply listening, but what has happened here is the articulation of all that accumulation that's been going on throughout our days, our weeks, that we haven't seen each other, or with new people that might come around, or whatever. And there's always, I've already lost at least 20 really good thoughts. I thought they were good thoughts. And I was like, oh yeah, I've got to say that. And ideally, the perfect medium would be, at least as I can imagine, getting the sense of the other, entering into the body of the other, or the mind of the other, or imagining the other, would be a telepathy of sorts, to where, well, that 30 minutes that I was listening, I would be able to just simply share a look, or insert thought here, just take it from my little square and place it over to you, and then you'd say, okay, I have that experience. So it comes down to experiencing the other. And how do we do that at our best? Well, we experiment, I guess. So through blindfolds, as Michael and I did the other, I guess that was last week. I don't remember now, but that was a not profound experience, but I did gain insights from that. The Death Café, talking about death, really stuck with me. And so I used death as an advisor, just as the shamanic technique, when they were going through depression, like knowing that those spirits are back there somewhere, and well, they're not inhabiting my body, but if I slow down, not necessarily at the pace of the world around me, but if I slow down, these bad spirits will catch up and plague my thoughts. So yeah, we're experimenting with finding the best medium with what we've got. There's no telepathy going on here, but there are the shared gestures. Even though I feel like I don't like the visual, I've noticed there is a lot of movement that goes on. And I guess earlier, I didn't share my drawing because I had a difference going on. I did have it here. I just didn't want to flip through and kind of explain, well, hold on a minute here, because the conversation continued on. But I was a little bit angry at you for sharing drawings, and we talked about it through a thread of, well, somebody might not be able to see it, or they might be listening. So Michelangelo's Grotius list, you explained pretty well, but then there are images after that. And well, what are we seeing here? Michael said eyes. Then after that, there were faces. But so that thought there affected how I participated in the conversation. So yeah, I think the bottom line is we're all searching for the best medium as we continue on with what we've got going on in our noggins.
Thank you. And searching for the best medium, and a little bit angry. And you mentioned a telepathy of sorts, of the mind of the other, imagining the other. And Doug, put that into words for someone who is blind.
So I'll preface it with, we talked about movies. This is one of the only movies I've watched maybe 2 or 3 times, because I own 2 or 3 movies and then I just never bought them again. But Amélie, which is a French movie. Perhaps Ed's nodding his head as if he's seen it, but they're without remembering the exact plot, other than it's a young middle-aged woman going through life events, and at the end she finds a love, I think, but she has kind of a special gift of being internal, but at one moment in the scene she brings out the external, to a blind person she notices in the street, or maybe that lives in her apartment building or whatever you call it in France. And she sees him one day walking through a market, and she just grabs him unexpectedly and starts. I don't think we can audibly hear everything she's saying, but so it's just la 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 la. And she's showing him fruits, vegetables, explaining everything going on around him. And he gets that feeling. He gets the sense. He knows what it feels like to see the world around him without vision. And at the end, I think a golden light pours from him as she walks on her way and leaves him in the street, just in awe with this ecstatic feeling. So I don't see the image right now, but it was a square block or square picture. And if I was to describe it, I don't think it's necessary, other than black, gray, two faces, one demonic looking, to either the left or the right, depending on how the...
You're talking about this, or the Amelie, the movie. You're talking about this, okay.
I'm talking about the picture now, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's indescribable, but it's more than a doodle that you would imagine, a modern day doodle. This is some sort of deep spirit-like Janus-faced image from the mind of a great artist. And that's perhaps the best I could do.
Right. I wish you had your picture that you did from the Death Cafe.
So I'll show it to you now that I'm feeling a little better. Ta-da.
Can you hold it up? Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, I see it fine. Thank you. And what do you know now about death that you did not know before you made that representation?
I don't know if the image here, but the image that I hold in my head is more vivid than anything that will be shown to others. But it reaffirmed the cycle aspect of our existence. The three of us in the conversation, and a few of us afterwards. Ed was one that noted the cyclical, there is no death. The term death is perhaps a moment at most, and not reality to a certain extent. So that cyclical aspect of death life, that's what I took away.
And just another clean question, then I'll shut up. And with all of that, what happens to a little bit angry?
It remains just as any thought. It's one that trickles away, and it's losing itself. It's still there now that you've asked it to be brought back. I'm reaching back now to grab it, but the feeling is not there. And I'd like to move on.
To me, and this is my model of the world, that gesture you made is beautiful. That to me is what's most interesting, is the hand-voice relationship. And it's primary to me. Before I had language, I was just listening to adults sitting around the table, making mouth noises and moving their hands. And I think that's, for the child mind, that pre-verbal mind, everything is communicative and very exciting. and scary too, because I think we don't have language yet, but we're on the way to getting there. And so that's my invitation is, you know, why I love having opportunities like this to really do the micro perceptual, slow down, give attention, and language and gesture and voice. To me, it's endlessly aesthetically pleasurable. So that's why I watch these again, because I enjoy watching people's faces and voices and hands, just the way I did when I was 2 years old. You know, it's like, wow, what's going on here? Looking at the adults. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, Doug. And I think that is the difference that makes a difference. And that what happens right before that little bit of anger, that little bit of anger, that I think that's very important if we can just sort of realize how rich that can be, rather than, oh, let's get through that as fast as possible. Let's pretend that's not there. Because this is my belief here, is that I think group life that is most vital and interesting is where those differences, we handle them in creative and surprising ways. And trying to find a positive intention behind some objection that someone gives me, and vice versa, is a high level skill. I'm not always very good at it, because sometimes I'll find myself getting caught in the undertow of, you know, something that's you know, that I'm not able to describe, some emotion that I can't describe yet. So I think that, and that sometimes creates so much fear, I just shut down, go into freeze or flight. I'm just going to check out, do something else, go shopping. Or, you know, there's a tendency to fight. We all know that one very well. Being males in our society are taught from a very early age to kill. I certainly was. I was raised by a drill sergeant. He taught us how to kill each other. And I think those are the kind of, you know, however ways you were raised, or the group mind that you were part of at a very early age, I think those patterns can get really hardwired. But the good news is we can diffuse, we can interrupt those kind of habitual fight, flight, freeze responses. And I think it's great that our cafes have given so much attention to this, because I think it's enriched my life personally, and I feel like when I go out into the street, I'm better able to deal with the very dysfunctional patterns that I see all around me, and the unecological ways people are relating to one another, and the jagged rhythms that are, I think, driving people insane. It's just certainly driving me insane. Anyway, so thanks for that, Doug. That's very, very creative, I think.
Can I add just a note to that? This is kind of a collage of thoughts that came up in the last exchanges. Moving backwards, the nice thing about having things hardwired is that they can be rewired. There's a biological hardwiring that you know, evolutionary biologists like to talk about, that I have a problem with. I believe anything that is wired can be rewired. It was made one way, it can be done another way. It might take a little effort, and it probably does, but you know, that can be done. That little bit of anger, I really like the phrase that Doug used. I would have said irked. because that's how I feel a lot in my life. I just feel irked a lot. Sometimes for good reasons, very often for no reason at all. But you know, it adds to the curmudgeon-y in the end, because you just get irked about those things. But you can get over irk a lot faster than you can, at least to me, than you can get over anger. The other thing that Doug said that really struck me was, well, I had this insight and maybe it was profound. And the only thing I can say to that is all insights are profound, all of them. And if we could just welcome the fact that I had you know, I love it when I have an insight. You know, it's probably right up there, you know, with those biological, physiological things that can happen to you. And you know, in any sense, even if it's just a little is a really moving moment for me. So I try to cultivate those, and I try to appreciate those more, and I try to honor them whenever I can. And the other thing was about the telepathy. In the course of I didn't have a career, actually, just all the jobs that I had and all the things that I had to do. On many occasions, probably more than most people, had to speak to large audiences of people. And sometimes it was in an auditorium, sometimes it was in an amphitheater. There could be anywhere from 200 to 1,000 people that are there. And I can tell you that when you're standing up in front of a group, if you're paying any kind of attention, if you are attending to what you're doing, as Michael, yes, I love that phraseology. You know who you're getting to, and you know who you're not getting to. Mm-hmm. It is so patently obvious that, and the only way that I've ever been able to explain it is that you get into sync, and which is a kind of, these are rhythms that you talked about right at the beginning, John. There are rhythms that are there, and you realize these folks and I are in rhythm, and there are other people who aren't. Now, it's always a challenge when you're up there. You'd like to have everybody in rhythm, knowing full well not all of them ever will be. And you also know when you're there, and I can only call this telepathic because I don't have any other way to explain the fact that I've got, let's say, 200 people in front of me, and they're all sending me messages, and I'm actually picking up on these. Not consciously, but a lot of time by gesture. A lot of times it's because somebody nodded, somebody smiled, somebody gasped, somebody groaned. The groan might not have had anything to do with the talk that you're giving. It might have been because they had a pain all of a sudden, but that kind of sorts itself out. But there is a kind of telepathy that happens within groups when that's one of the reasons that I like to look at our cafes in that, the multi-screen view where everybody's kind of on screen at one time, because I'm able to then see reactions from people to what's, John says something and Michael reacts in some way, and I can see that. And that helps me because it gives me a better feeling about how we are as a group together and who and how we're all reacting with one another. So that was my little collage collection of notes on what was just riffed through by the others there.
So I'm just going to riff, but I'm going to need John's help at one point. I'm going to riff one. When it comes to the metaphor of telepathy, it's about atmosphere. It's about reading the weather. Ed did a good job. You feel like the atmosphere, whether you're in a room or outside, you feel something's coming at you or interacting with you, and it can come from different directions and stuff. So that's a metaphor I use for telepathy to ground it in my century point. Now, John, I'm going to do something as to riff off the next point. I want you to show me that picture, and I'm going to give you my description of that picture you just gave.
Of the Death Cafe?
No, the one with Michelangelo that you showed Doug. I want to use the same picture that Doug did, just for contrast.
Please. Can you see it okay?
Yeah. Okay. So this is my descriptive word choice for this. It seems to be in black and white. There's a very stern face coming out with eyes bulging and big eyebrows and has a stern face, but it's coming out of a fog, coming out of something that is unknown to me. There's subtle other images that are just peeking out of this fog or this fuzziness, and it's almost like this person is actually, the face is coming out of a mirror that has fog on it, that has steam on it, and so it has a mirror but plus a very rich detail surrounding the face, the strong nose, the eyes, and the mouth is giving me I'm here to show you something. Pay attention. So I'm done there, John. Thank you for that. But one of the reasons I was trying to use that is contrast with Ed, like the word that was perfect of irk and anger. And some of this comes from my studying of Carla McLaren and her notion of empathy, that the larger your vocabulary, you can assign almost like a color code of anger being, instead of bright, rageful red, it can be an irk, a different shade of red that's irking. It's not that intense, but it's still anger, still like frustration. I have somebody who used to pick up on my anger from the coffee shop, my cohort, and who owned it, and he could pick up my anger, and he always was trying to put his words on my anger. I'm going, no, Darren, I'm frustrated, or I'm peeved. No, you don't get to assign the word to my emotion. But it's interesting, too, that people have reaction to even the word anger that is prejudice of even wanting to hear it, because that means it's going to bring up something to talk about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the power of language, like you, John, like we're discussing, that power of language, both verbal and nonverbal, and assigning words, like a painter assigns a color to something, a shade of color or something. That's been very helpful for me, not only for myself, but also being able to, on my best days, not always, receive how somebody might be using words to send at me that have a certain energetic charge and description that I'm going, in my head, silently, I'm going, fuck you. And I'm, rather than going, oh, that's interesting. Thank you very much for that. So this whole dialogue, like all of you, that's what it's activated in me, is this. I'm finally owning for myself, I have this ability that I can use, versus letting the trauma keep my ability locked down, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, Michael. Just to shortly interrupt. One of the beauties of the English language, in contrast to other languages, is the richness of vocabulary.
Okay.
From the beginning, from the time English came to be a language at all, which was about 500 AD.
Okay.
Before that, there was nothing that even resembled English.
Okay.
All other languages are much older than English. English is a new one. But from the very beginning, English had this ability to absorb words. John mentioned the English guy, History of English in Words.
Owen Barfield.
Barfield, thank you. Oh, man. Don't get old, guys. Don't get Barfield. Okay.
This one.
Yes. Yeah. He works this out beautifully in his History of English in Words.
Oh, good.
Where he shows you that we just absorb anything that the English speakers didn't have a notion or a concept for. They simply took somebody else's. They're not like the Germans. The Germans have to find and develop their own words, and so they end up with these sentence-long words that are actually very nice when you're speaking German, because even if you've never heard it before, you know exactly what they mean. But it has a technical side of it. But what the English language has, and this is the thing I like about it, is that we have these subtle nuances. They're not all equal, but they're kind of equal. You can be peeved, you can be irked, you can be angry, you can be you can be all kinds of things. And to be able to, and completing distinctions, to know kind of where peeving ends and irking begins.
Yes,
Or you can kind of like draw the line for you. On am I peeved or am I irked? Then of course the reaction will be based on that. And that is truly one of the beauties of the language that we have. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that's going away, because most people just don't know about all of the words that they have available to them. And fortunately, I was able to instill into my daughters a sense for that. And so we sometimes have vocabulary contests where you can just tell they got a new word somewhere and they'll throw it into a conversation just to see, does Dad know this one? Yeah.
Well, what's interesting in the study of emotional intelligence and how to regulate our emotions, the larger your vocabulary helps you regulate. It kind of goes, and maybe you or John, but Ed, I'm thinking, way back, the act of naming something way back was a source of control, right? Just to give something a name.
Oh yes. The whole notion of runes and that was all. They were also in the Anglo-Saxon world.
Okay.
If you knew someone's runes, if you could rune their name, then you had power over them. That's how you did that. So that was part of that magical structure of consciousness that Gapsa talks about. That in naming, giving something a name, actually means something. That the other side of that coin is the ambiguity that flows into every single language that I've encountered.
Right.
Where things mean what they mean, but they could also mean the opposite, which was a much older way of understanding things. Like soccer being blessed or cursed, like cleave being separating or binding, which is our last English word that still has that feeling to it. Those are all. If you're into language, then you start exploring those kinds of things. If you're just into talking, you don't, and then you get overwhelmed very easily.
And so kind of updating that, they've shown that the better you bring a reasonable articulation of naming what you're feeling, it actually regulates your nervous system in a way that it helps you, not, because if you some people name something anger and they actually see anger, and when they're not really accurately, they're talking about fear. They're talking about sadness, maybe. I mean, for me, my biggest jump in healing, when I realized that a lot of my anger was real on this level, but underneath, they're tied to it was sadness, and I needed to get underneath and honor the sadness as much as the anger. So it's bringing articulation. It's working with the inner articulation of the heart, in a way.
You raise a very interesting and I think important point, Michael. You have to get beneath whatever the surfaces of things and deal with whatever is beneath the surface.
Exactly.
And for the vast majority of people in my environment, I'm going to exclude my family, but I talk to my neighbors, the people I run into in the city or wherever I'm going, don't do that.
Yeah, right.
Even my extended family, I've heard comments from them, can you stop being so deep? Can you just give me a break? I don't want to think about that. They don't want to go there. And in a sense, you have to honor that and say, okay.
Yes. No, that's true.
But it doesn't stop the mischievous side of me from saying, well, every once in a while, you can just kind of drag them down a little bit, not so that the water's over their nose, but so that they have to close their mouth for a while. And you go, well, maybe I'm going under,
it just hones your skill better of not letting them know you're going deep.
Right, yeah, I'm not going
deep. And it actually, I frame it just when you said that, it goes to the point that John of thinking relationally, because when you think relationally, you think surface and depth, and you're absolutely right. That's one thing I've had to learn, even though, is to actually embrace that ability I have to work with that, but not being overly bullying or confrontational with somebody that can't. It just, I beat my head up and I got a lot of bumps and bruises in my head, and I'm done. Finished with that. I'm finished with that. My head is supposed to be used for something else than that. Now let your imaginations wonder about that.
Yes, but there are times when that impishness gets the best of us.
I hope we can do I know TJ and Ed and I are discussing a big project working with a book on the consequences of the axial age. Saul Bell, yeah, that one. And I hope once we get this off the ground, maybe Doug, you could help us create a page for this, and we'll have some dates so that people want to join us. But this was TJ initiated this, and I actually read that book and the companion book that Bella wrote before it, called The Religion and Human Evolution. So I read both of these books a number of years ago, but for me to go back and look at all the notes, and I underlined it quite a bit. I don't remember any of it at all. You know? But I think on some level, on a psychic level, I resonated with it, and it's still there somewhere. But I think the pleasure of working in a group of people who are real competent readers and who've studied history and etymology in ways probably much deeper than I have. Most of my history comes out of Hollywood movies. You know? So so I think that it could be a really fun adventure for us all to like look at this axial age, and look at all these scholars and what they're bringing to it. And there's some speculating that we may be going into another axial age. And what kind of argument? I wouldn't be building this argument. TJ and Ed would, because I don't do arguments very well. I'm much more about singing and dancing and creating a collage. So I think that would be a lot of fun. And I want to do this. I want to do this book someday with you, Ed, because I think this is I haven't read this one, but I read Poetic Diction. And I just finished a biography on Owen Barfield. And he was a follower of Rudolf Steiner. So he comes out of that area, and Coleridge and the Romantics, and I'm very drawn to that period. So this is another possibility of, I think what our strengths are. If we can find someone who has a strength in an area where I feel weak, that's a win-win. And vice versa. If there's areas where I'm strong and that person's weak, that's a win-win. So I think we're living in an age of enormous information being thrown at us. And from nefarious forces and from benevolent forces, from junk science to really, brilliant science. So we may not be experts in all of these areas. And even if we study one area, we will find that the experts in those areas don't agree on a damn thing. Which is not very encouraging. Because I just want to know one way, the right way. Just tell me what that is. But you'll find these experts, they're as clueless as anyone else. So I think this is what the challenge is how can we create, if we don't want to go back to school and go into a graduate program, how can we informally, outside of academia, create these vibrant kind of networks where we could take on a challenging book or two and contrast and compare them, and using the different styles that we all have to communicate with one another. And I think we already have a track record of doing this. So we can draw upon many experiences. Those of us who did Sloterdijk, some of us weren't fond of Sloterdijk, but it was a good exercise just to get people together, to stay together long enough so that it prepared us to do Aurobindo, which was a motherfucker. That was a hard book. But I think to get half a dozen people all the way from the beginning to the last page wasn't easy. A lot of people dropped out. And I think the same thing has been true of the Bateson group, that Doug and Michael and Jeffrey and myself, and there were maybe a half dozen people more that started it but didn't stay very long. And then there are those who just hang in there. I think Michael came like halfway through. And there may be people who are checking it out. I think they're high quality conversations that have come out of this book, the reading of this book. So I'm just like putting that all out there. And it's not all about study time. I mean, some of us like to put on our thinking caps and go a little deeper than usual, but some of us don't want to do that. And so I want to be very respectful that some other people may not want to do that, but I do. So I'm going to find the people in this community who want to go deeper. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. And you can listen to these recordings, and maybe it will lead you to some other exploration, and feed that back to us. I would really invite anyone who may be following us at all, you know, if you find something interesting, let us know what that is. And I think that would enrich everybody's maps and our map making. So I'm just putting that out there as possibilities.
Yeah, that goes along with, I think I posted on the thread that that we were talking about how to create kind of a entry or welcoming for people. And you know, it was my like I posted, it was my just kind of being an interested spectator and deciding if I felt comfortable engaging, which eventually I did after 2 months, because all the threads and the videos that I listened to were of the quality I wanted to engage, but I had to take time to feel comfortable with my own self of kind of, you know, making that next step. So I agree with you, John, what you just laid out.
The thing about our get-togethers here, they remind me a lot about the seminars I used to visit when I was studying in Germany when I was here the first time. In the meantime, the Germans have revised their education system, and it's nothing like it was before. But back in my day, when you studied in Germany, and this is probably closer to the way it was before the First World War even, when masses of Americans went to Germany, got their PhDs, and went back to the United States and became more or less the presidents of the land-grant universities that came up in the mid-19th century. Almost everybody was educated in Germany at the time. And at the time, and when I was going through, even though I took a degree in Anglistic philology, as it was called, my concentration was on applied linguistics. I had a total for my entire master's program of 0 required courses per se. I had to take a course in linguistics. I had to take, which one didn't matter. I had to take some literature course before 1860, or actually before 1800, in the Romantic period, sometime after that was modern. That was about it. There were a couple of translation exercises, German, English, German, that were mandatory. And I had to get the large Latin exam because you couldn't get a degree in a language without having Latin. So I had to make up for 9 years of Latin on the side as we were going through. But the point that I'm making is there were hardly any requirements. And the other point was there was no course that was ever repeated. Every professor did whatever it is that they were doing whenever they were going to do it. So you looked at what was coming up in the next semester, and it's what the professors decided I'm going to do this semester. Yes, there were survey lectures that were held. You could go and listen to those, and somebody, it was usually a graduate assistant of some kind, that gave you the history of, you know, German idealism, or, you know, the English Romantic movement. And so they would go through those whole things. But you got what you got because you decided I could do this and I could incorporate it into what we were doing. And then when you went to a seminar, if there were 10 people there at the beginning, that was a lot. I did show up at one seminar because there were 2 very antithetical professors that decided to do a joint class, and 200 people showed up for a room that would hold 20 people. But they just wanted to listen to those 2 argue with each other. Yeah. But over the course, even if there were just 10 or 15, which was a big one, over the course of the semester, we would dwindle down to 3 or 4. Even though these were things that people probably needed in some way, shape, or form for their studies, they didn't make it through to the end. They visited other things. They found other interests. They found places where they could spend a longer time. So it's not unusual for me to see that people drop out after one. And when we're doing this online, in an informal environment. You're not getting any credit for it. I don't want to put this into any kind of economic cost benefit terms, but it takes a lot of it takes devotion more than anything. I think devotion's the right word there. It takes devotion to get through to the end. And it's hard to bring that much devotion in this day and age. I don't fault people for dropping out. It's hard to maintain the course in that regard. So in a place where you almost had to, in a sense, there was still that kind of dissipation where they're just not going to be there to the end. And everyone who was there simply brought what they had to bear on whatever the topic was at hand. Because yes, we were all studying Anglistics in some way, shape, or form, but this person wanted to be a Shakespeare expert. This person was going to be an elementary school teacher with a concentration in English. This person was going to be an upper secondary level teacher, in the language or whatnot. So everybody kind of had their own way of dealing with whatever it is that we were dealing with, and that was the enrichment that you had, because you had a professor who was trying to solve some research problem for himself and was actually looking for solicited, qualified input that might bring him or her to ideas that they might not have had before, and ways of looking at things that would, enhance that research purpose. So you always had the feeling that you were contributing. You weren't just getting things from this, you were also contributing. You were simply bringing yourself there. And to me, it was just a wonderful way to study, because nobody was telling you to take this course and make sure you have it in this year and make sure you get through this. And when you were done, you submitted all your paperwork to the examining office, and they said, you have enough or you don't. And if you didn't, they'd tell you you needed a little more here or maybe a little more there. And then you went off and did that. And if you had enough, they'd set a date for the exams that you had to write, and for the, give you if you had a supervising professor for the thesis that you're going to write, that was always a help. Because then they didn't have to go find one for you, but they would have done that as well. And so it was to me, that was how I had always envisioned education taking place. Doing what you want to do in a field that you were interested in a way that suited you. And it took, you didn't do that in Germany at that time. That was kind of a novelty. But that was always what I had hoped that university life would be like. And that's actually what I see in what we're doing here in the cafe and in the reading groups that we're having, even if I can't participate in all of them. I wasn't able to participate in the Aurobindo readings, for example, but I did the reading, even if I didn't attend the seminar, so to speak, or the get-together. Bateson was the same way. I did the reading, sometimes a week or two behind. I was not under that much pressure to make sure I was prepared for every meeting that was there. But I was able to get through those books because there were people out there who were doing this that I could follow along with, even if I couldn't contribute to the threads that were associated with those. So there is a kind of inspirational value to what we're doing. There's a real value that can be derived from it. And everybody can kind of participate in the best way that they can. And I think those are the advantages that we have. And anything that we can do to enhance those, of course, is, I think, beneficial to the community as a whole.
I strongly agree, Ed. And I think that's great, because the Gebser reading, I wasn't on any of those calls. And I had read the book maybe 20 years before, back in the 90s. But I did follow the videos, and you were on them, weren't you? Yeah. And so I got familiar with the faces and the voices, and I was able to reread. And I did join the forum, and I typed in my responses and got responses to my responses that way. So I participated in that way. And I think the next one, whatever that was, maybe it was Sloterdijk, I think I joined that one. And so I was on all of those conference calls, or most of them. So I think everybody has to find the lurker within, you know, and a relationship. I think that and find that the boundary between passive and active.
Yeah, right.
And do I just want to be passive, absorbing what other people have learned and taking notes or thinking about it or forgetting about it right away? Or do I want to get actively engaged and then maybe I want to make a proposal of my own, see if anybody has a feeling about that that's strong enough to create a communal or collaborative effort. So I would just invite anybody who's watching this or listening to this, you may not be interested in joining the cafe, but you may not want to be just totally passive, absorbing what other people are,
Yeah, right.
communicating on it. So you can, we're very friendly here, and there's a template here. If you want to join, please do, and create your own thing.
Right.
And you know, maybe someone will be drawn to your project, and we definitely want to sponsor everybody and give everybody an opportunity, because I think we're living in an unprecedented, complex age, and we want to use this technology in healthy and creative ways rather than be sabotaged or manipulated in nefarious ways. And I believe we all have had that experience. And I think our social and cultural and political worlds are in turmoil right now. And for me personally, I've never seen discourse at an all-time low. There may have been other periods in history where it was as bad as this, but I'm trying to think of one. Maybe Hitler's Germany. But I think I think we need to really we who love language and communication and have benefited from all the trailblazers that came before us, and the young who have new things to tell us, new things to communicate to us. We need to really give our attention to that. So I think this is what I hope we are starting to do here is just, just to find that balance between the visionary, the critic, and the realist. And this is sort of a setup for this next little exercise I want to do. And then the buzzer will ring, and then we can go out in the playground and have fun. I remember the difference between.
What? It's not fun, John?
Yeah. This is going to maybe be a little. Maybe you have to put on your thinking cap to do this. Maybe not. I think it's a very simple little process. But for me, it's about completing distinctions, and about this cafe. And the cafe has been almost 2 years in existence. I think in September will be our anniversary. And some of us have been on a lot of the calls. Some of us been on in and out. I come and go. I'm sure most of us have. I like to be here when there's a real topic that I feel a strong buzz about. But I realize, some of it has to be. I can't just sit back passively and hope somebody comes up with a topic that I'm interested in. I have to sometimes say, hey, I'm interested in this, and get the permission of the group to move forward. So I think we all have to take turns doing that to keep this a vibrant place. So I'm just wanting to ask everyone if you could take some time right now about the cafe. What have you learned? 3 things that you have learned at the cafe. And it could be a eureka, an aha, or by Jove, I've got it. It could be something really big or something really small. But just 3 things that you've learned. And when you have those 3, just give me an indication that you've completed that.
Sorry, guys. My daughter called, and when she calls, I don't hear from her. I gotta take a break and take it. So I'm sorry about that. But,
Okay.
I was listening the other ear, and I wanted to. Maybe I'm being persnickety. When you talk about, John, the way I feel, your metaphor lands about the liminal and the imaginal and working with all this information and the nefarious and stuff. That's why I emphasize, I'm coming from the same place, but using the metaphor of attending to those moments when there's a liminal. And I really like the way part of what you said is, and maybe that's where you're going, is how we integrate being in the liminal, because we go into liminal zones, from my experience, and then I come out.
Right.
And attending to that movement, again, I'm just going to stick with my sensory. It's not the only one, but it's the one I kind of feel most I'm comfortable working with me because of my life history, attending to that movement. And so I just wanted to say one of the ways that I put this into practice is walking the labyrinth, because as a description of the practice to help me with that in between, that I've noticed has really helped me and grounded me in the practice. When I walk the labyrinth, I bow before I cross, and I bow towards the outside. I bow to the crossing the boundary and then turn around and bow. And there's 6 times I have to do that. And I've noticed when I walked the labyrinth how much that has helped me in my day-to-day experience of attending to, this is a boundary, or a distinction, or something that is different, and what's on the other side of it, and really feel into that. And it's a skill. I don't do it always good. Sometimes I smash the motherfucking door down. But I've gotten better at not smashing the door down and maybe just knocking.
Cool. Great. You jumped way ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, John.
No, I was just leading a little process. I was asking, but you jumped. You did the whole thing.
I'm sorry.
But I asked for 3 things that you've learned at the cafe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then I wanted to ask, of those 3 things that, I guess, what is the number 1 learning? And Doug, and then you've lived far ahead, and that's great. And we can go back.
Please do.
I'm looking at how do we complete distinctions.
Okay.
And this is an exercise for that purpose. But you've already completed quite a few, and that what you've just delivered, which is great. But I was wondering, Doug or Ed, if you could just, out of the 3 things that you learned, which is the one that's most important for you? Just share right now.
Yeah. So I'll give a quick background of. I divided it into 3, which were kind of my top 1 for each one. So there's the personal, the group that we have in the cafe, and the outside collective, or the world. So each one had its own top number 1, which was just participation, if I was to vocalize one single word. So the personal was participation. The group would be this biotic bonding within an abiotic environment. And the world collective, I wrote down so much, which so nothing is left out, nothing is certain in the world, but I've given new meaning to everything is possible. I think the word participation sums up all 3. So it's how we, and or interact, participate within the world, with each other, with ourselves. So.
And we participate with one another. And there's a lot more going on there. But there was the personal in the cafe, and there was the collective outside, the outside world. and the biotic and the abiotic and new meaning. So there are a lot of key words there we could go into, but I know there's a process. You divide it into three, I believe, and then each third had a number one, and so I'm getting a sense of how you gave structure to your process. And so, Ed, if you would be so kind,
Yes.
if you
Three
wanna
things. Yes. In reverse order, from number 3 to the winner on the Olympic platform, however you want to look at that, okay? 3 things that I've learned from the cafes is patience, tolerance, and that there are others out there, whoever they are, who know way more about lots of things that I have no clue about. And they are so willing to share with me. Those are the 3.
Thank you. And I think you've already completed this process, Michael, unless there's something you want to add.
Let me give it a little more structure because I kind of just got so enthused. It ran away with me.
No, it's great. 'Cause you did the next step, which I was going to ask.
Yeah, but the 3 is, I would say, to be embodied where I am when I enter the cafe, to be open to the responses of the sight, visual, hearing, and even body nonverbals that may come across, even though it's different than being across from somebody. And then the third thing is just feeling free to be open.
And feel free to be open, and patience and tolerance, and that there are others out there who know a lot, who are willing to share. And we participate, and the personal in the cafe and the collective outside world. With all that, I would just invite you guys to, like, this isn't like a homework assignment or anything else, but something that I find useful is when I've learned something, what action can I take that can ground this learning and amplify it? And if I do that, take that action, whatever that is, and amplify that learning, then something else happens. And that's what happens next, is of great interest, because I believe that is when we give, this is maybe sound a little new agey, but we give the field an opportunity to respond to our initiative. And then we get feedback. Then feedback and feed forward starts to happen. And then you may find yourself something that you wouldn't have given your attention to all of a sudden demands your attention, or something, or you meet someone, or a book falls off a shelf and hits you on the head. The library angel. You never know where it's going to come. But there is this creative capacity when we center in a field, we ask questions, or we appreciate something that we've learned, and we take an action. Then I believe we start to create something that's more participatory, and we can share that with one another. And I think we've already done this on a number of occasions. We're getting ready to wrap up. We have a few more minutes left. So I just would like to invite everybody to consider this as an opportunity for all of us to learn from one another at a deeper level, because we all are in this field together, and the field is much smarter than any of us individually. But it can't come through. It has to come through each of us in our own ways, with the unique tempo rhythms, that we communicate with. It could be something in a journal. Who knows where it's going to come, how it's going to come through each of us. And it isn't something you have to share. If you want to share it next time we get together, I think that would be cool. But I just like the idea that rather than leave too many loops open, we start to close a few of them. So we can say, listen up, everybody. I learned number 1, number 2, number 3. And of those 3, this one was the most important. And this is the action that I took in my local community to, I planted a seed. Maybe 20 years from now, there'll be a tree there, or maybe I sat in the shade and I memorized the sonnet by Shakespeare. Who knows what I'm going to do to amplify this learning? But, I might do a volunteer, something that I do in that capacity, something social. I might cook a meal for somebody, which I might not have done before. So it could be something really mundane. Actually, I think it is a good idea to do something very simple and mundane, something that's doable. But I have just found I get lots of feedback when I find some sort of grounded action, and then the system seems to, those kind of resonances and those kind of vibrations start to become obvious to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a dream or just a fantasy that I might have.
Right.
So thank you all for this participation. I've enjoyed it a great deal.
Yeah, this has been fun. Thanks, John. Yeah, and I totally concur. And, it goes along with Ed in a way, action or doing, what do you do with it? You do it, you kind of, it becomes alive, and I do know a little side note on this. I think that gets in the way that we have to learn to work with is based for a lot of reasons. There's multiple reasons, culturally, trauma, whatever, and it could be any number of things. But one of the reasons for me is being alive is fucking scary sometimes. And that gets in, unless we can really, this is my Zen practice, really sit with being alive, with everything it entails, and get a renewed sense that's not dictated by our past all the way back to childhood, even though we need to honor it, because I don't want to dismiss it, but at the same time, that deepening that sense of being alive. It's alive.
And also this is an invitation way to bring some kind of ritual.
Yes, John, yes.
Because I think that's what many of us are missing. Is that ritual side of our natures.
Yeah.
Get to amplify and give our attention to feedback from our environments in unusual and weird ways sometimes. But it sometimes starts in a very, just a small micro movement in one direction or another.
And let's not let the abiotic be the ritual. This is a different kind of ritual you're talking about that's ancient, and it's in our bones. And we've lost touch with it. It's not a mechanical form of ritual. They have similar, like Bateson. I feel Bateson talks about there may be similarities in the patterns, but the richness of the ritual you're talking about far outweighs the mechanical.
Hear, hear.
Thank you for the conversation. I really enjoyed the direction, the tuning into the field that I believe we all accomplished here. The maximum amount of telepathy achieved.
Nice, Doug. Nice.
So just a general thank you as always. Look forward to next week if we can all attend.
Works for me.
Excellent. Nice seeing everybody. I won't be here next week. I'm going to go down to San Diego and hang out with a friend at a different cafe.
Have fun.
Whoa. Oh, going sloughing off here. I don't know. Okay. Have fun.
Take care. Take care, guys. Love you. Bye-bye.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.